The transmission from the final probe cut abruptly, leaving the Supreme Council chamber of the Galactic Alliance in silence. General Zyler's scaled brow furrowed as she watched the data playback one more time. The probe had transmitted only 14 seconds of footage before its signal was lost, but those seconds contained something impossible. Rewinding to timestamp 4:12, she announced, her clawed finger tapping the holographic controls. Watch the lower quadrant. The assembled leadership of the Alliance military leaned forward. Ambassador Vlar's compound eyes reflected the hologram's glow as his mandibles clicked nervously. Fleet Admiral Kthar's feathers bristled, her raptor-like head tilting to better focus on the indicated section. The footage showed the surface of Hades Prime, a Class Omega planet with toxic atmosphere, crushing gravity fluctuations, and constant meteor bombardment. No species in the Alliance could survive there unprotected for more than minutes. Yet there, in the lower right corner, unmistakable against the hellish landscape, a bipedal figure moving with purpose across the surface, seemingly unprotected save for a thin suit. Sensor malfunction, Kthar declared dismissively. No biological entity could survive those conditions. The probe deployed 3 redundant sensor arrays, Zyler countered. All 3 recorded identical data. She magnified the image further and observed the structures in the background. Those aren't natural formations. Vlar's antennae twitched. General, are you suggesting colonization of a Class Omega planet? That's technologically impossible, even for the most advanced Alliance species. Not colonization, Zyler said quietly. Look at the formation. The movement patterns. Those aren't settlers. She paused, her reptilian face showing as much concern as her species could express. Those are soldiers in training. Kthar let out a screech of derision. Absurd. No military would waste resources training in environments where their troops would die before learning anything useful. Unless, Vlar interjected, they don't die there. Silence fell across the chamber again. This requires further investigation, Zyler finally declared. I want a stealth reconnaissance mission. Maximum discretion. If there's a species capable of not just surviving, but conducting military operations on a Class Omega world, the Alliance needs to know. And if this species isn't in our database? Kthar asked, her voice uncharacteristically subdued. Zyler stared at the frozen image of the impossible soldier. Then may the ancestors help us all. The stealth vessel Whispered Shadow maintained its position in the asteroid belt orbiting Hades Prime. Its adaptive camouflage rendered it virtually undetectable, while its enhanced sensors probed the planet below. Commander Lisvoth, a seasoned Arcturian intelligence officer, monitored the incoming data with growing disbelief. Transmission secure, General, she reported. But you need to see this yourself. Thousands of light-years away in Alliance headquarters, Zyler, Kthar, and Vlar watched as crystal-clear footage streamed into the secure briefing room. Unlike the probe's brief, chaotic glimpse, this was detailed, focused reconnaissance. The images showed what could only be described as a military training ground on the surface of Hades Prime. Dozens of bipedal figures, clearly the same species as glimpsed earlier, were engaged in various exercises. Some were navigating an obstacle course through a field of falling meteors, using the deadly projectiles as stepping stones and shields. Others were conducting combat drills in the planet's variable gravity zones, their bodies adapting with unnerving speed as they went from near weightlessness to 5 times standard gravity in seconds. Magnify Section 3, Zyler ordered. The image zoomed in on a group of trainees. Their protective gear was minimal, far less than would be required by any Alliance species. More shocking still, some portions of their skin were exposed directly to the caustic atmosphere. Their epidermis shows corrosion damage, Vlar noted, his scientific background evident in his clinical observation. But they're continuing to function. They're not just functioning, Kthar said, her earlier skepticism replaced by growing alarm. They're thriving. Look at their combat efficiency ratings. They're improving despite environmental conditions that should be rendering them incapacitated at minimum. The footage shifted to another area where trainees were engaged in live-fire exercises against what appeared to be native fauna, monstrosities that had evolved in Hades Prime's hellish conditions. The creatures were nightmares of tooth, claw, and armor, yet the bipeds were hunting them with practiced precision. "What are we seeing?" Vlar whispered. "What species is this?" The answer came moments later as the cameras captured a clearer image of one trainee who had removed part of their protective headgear. The face was unmistakable from the Alliance database. "Humans," Xyler said, the word falling like a stone into water. "They're humans from Sol 3. Earth." "Impossible," Kthar hissed. "Humans are cataloged as a Class C species. Pre-FTL. Technological development limited to their home system. They shouldn't have the capability to establish off-world training facilities, let alone on Class Omega planets." "Clearly," Vlar interjected, "our intelligence is outdated." Lisvatha's voice came through the comms again. "General, we've detected similar training operations on 6 other Class Omega planets in this sector alone. Each facility appears to specialize in different extreme conditions." The feed switched to a montage. Humans training in the crushing depths of gas giant atmospheres, exercising in vacuum conditions on a moon with temperature fluctuations of over 500 degrees, conducting operations amid rivers of lava on a high-gravity world, even swimming through the liquid methane oceans of an ice planet. "They're systematically training in every hostile environment the galaxy has to offer," Xyler said, her normally impassive face showing shock. "But why? And how long has this been happening under our surveillance?" "Commander," Vlar addressed Lisvath, "any indication they've detected your presence?" "Negative, Ambassador. Our cloaking technology." An alarm suddenly blared through the transmission. The image shook violently. "We're being scanned." Lisvatha's voice was tight with surprise. "Unknown technology. It's cutting through our cloaking field like it isn't there." Evasive maneuvers initiated. The feed showed the whispered shadow pulling away from Hades Prime, accelerating to escape velocity. Then, something fast and dark streaked across the screen. The transmission destabilized. Multiple interceptors launched from the surface, Lisvath reported through static. "Design unknown. Speed exceeding our maximum by factor of..." The transmission cut out entirely. 3 tense minutes passed before it resumed, now audio only. "This is Commander Lisvath. We've evaded pursuit by entering the system's radiation belt. Ship damaged, but operational. The human vessels tracked us through 4-dimensional space. They shouldn't have that capability. They shouldn't have any of these capabilities." She paused. "General, we need to deploy more reconnaissance assets. This situation is far beyond initial assessment parameters." Kthar's feathers were fully erect now, a sign of extreme agitation in her species. If humans have developed this level of technology in secret and are training their forces to operate in environments no Alliance species can function in, it suggests preparation for war, Vlar finished quietly. "No," Xyler said, her eyes still fixed on the last clear image they had received. A human soldier standing amid a storm of meteors, not running from them, but moving through them with practiced ease. It suggests preparation for something much worse than war. 2 standard cycles later, the Supreme Council of the Alliance had convened an emergency session. The chamber was filled beyond capacity, with representatives from all 37 member species present either physically or via secure hologram. The atmosphere was tense, bordering on panic. "Order!" Supreme Counselor TX Athalian's booming voice echoed through the chamber. The massive Centaurian's 4 arms raised in a gesture commanding silence. "We will address this crisis with discipline." Once quiet had been restored, Xyler, Vlar, and Kthar took the central platform. Behind them, a secure data projection displayed the compiled intelligence on the human training operations. "Over the past 2 cycles," Xyler began, "we have deployed 16 additional reconnaissance assets to the 7 identified human training facilities. 12 were lost. For return with the data you're now seeing." The projection showed enhanced footage from each facility alongside biological scans of the human trainees. The data was even more alarming than initial reports suggested. Humans are not merely surviving in these environments, Vlar explained, taking over the briefing. They are pushing the boundaries of their biological adaptability through a combination of genetic modification, technological augmentation, and what appears to be a deliberate training methodology that forces rapid adaptation. He highlighted a sequence showing human trainees performing complex mechanical repairs while exposed to radiation levels that would kill most Alliance species within minutes. Their cellular regeneration rates exceed anything in our biological database. They're healing from exposure effects that should be fatal, and their bodies are adapting to resist future damage. Thar stepped forward. From a military perspective, the implications are severe. These aren't standard military drills. These are preparation for extinction-level combat scenarios. Her tell alone indicated a training exercise where humans were navigating through a simulated ship corridor while it decompressed, continuing to function even as the atmosphere vented around them. They're training to fight while dying, she said bluntly. No Alliance military doctrine includes such concepts. A Volus representative, their gas-filled environment suit hissing slightly, raised a manipulator. Could this not simply be their natural, evolutionary response? Perhaps humans evolved under conditions more extreme than we realized. Sol 3 is a standard class M planet, Vlar replied. Certainly it has regions of environmental extremes, but nothing approaching Class Omega conditions. This is deliberate preparation. For what? The question came from multiple council members simultaneously. Zyler stepped forward again. That is precisely what we need to determine. Conventional intelligence gathering has proven inadequate. We believe we need direct observation. You mean infiltration? TX Athalion stated, not a question. Yes, Zyler nodded. We've identified the most suitable candidate from our Special Operations Division. Agent Zik. A murmur ran through the assembly. Agent Zik's reputation was legendary within Alliance intelligence circles. A Morphean, one of the rare shape-shifting species, Zik had successfully infiltrated dozens of sensitive locations throughout known space. The plan is for Agent Zik to infiltrate the training facility designated Gehenna 4, Zyler continued. This is a tidally locked world with extreme temperature differentials. One hemisphere molten, the other frozen, with a permanent superstorm band along the Terminator zone. The human facility there appears to be among their most advanced, based on energy signatures. The risk is extreme, Thar added, but Zik's natural abilities give them the best chance of gathering intelligence while maintaining cover. Even with shape-shifting capabilities, survival on Gehenna 4 will require significant technological support. The Council deliberated for hours, with many representatives expressing fear that such infiltration could be interpreted as an act of war if discovered. Eventually, however, the motion passed by a narrow margin. The need to understand human capabilities and intentions outweighed the risks. As the session concluded, Vlar approached Zyler privately. You didn't mention the most disturbing aspect, he said quietly. Which is? Zyler asked, though her expression suggested she already knew. The radiation signatures we detected around these facilities. Some of them match theoretical weapons systems that our scientists have deemed too dangerous to even prototype. Zyler nodded slowly. The humans aren't just training for war, Vlar. They're preparing for something that scares even them. Agent Zik had infiltrated hostile environments before, but nothing had prepared them for Gehenna 4. Even with the most advanced environmental protection the Alliance could provide, simply existing on this world was agony. The Morphean's current form, a perfect replication of a human maintenance technician based on stolen personnel files, felt wrong. Not because of the shape-shifting. Zik had worn thousands of forms in their career. No, this discomfort came from the environment itself. Every cell in their body screamed against the conditions. The permanent storm wall of the Terminator zone, where hot and cold hemispheres met, generated winds exceeding 400 kilometers per hour. The atmospheric composition included corrosive compounds that slowly ate through protective gear. Electromagnetic disturbances from the planet's unstable core disrupted equipment, and caused random energy discharges that could cook an unprotected being from the inside out. And yet, here were humans, training, living, almost enjoying themselves. Zig's cover identity as Maintenance Technician Alvarez gave them access to most areas of the facility. The infiltration had been flawless, with the real Alvarez intercepted during transit to Gehenna 4 and currently in comfortable custody on an Alliance vessel. So far, no one had questioned Zig's presence or behavior. The facility itself defied comprehension. Built directly into the storm wall, it used the tremendous energy of the perpetual superstorm to power itself. The architecture was pragmatically brutal, all exposed supports and minimal shielding. Efficiency over comfort, survival over luxury. Zig was currently in what the humans called the pit, an enormous training chamber extending deep into the planet's crust. Here, the electromagnetic disturbances were at their most intense, randomly altering the local gravity and occasionally causing spontaneous combustion of atmospheric gases. A squad of human trainees had entered minutes ago. Their protective gear was alarmingly minimal, just enough to prevent immediate death but not enough to truly shield them from the environment's effects. Through the observation window, Zig watched as an instructor, distinguished by red markings on their gear, addressed the group. Today's exercise: emergency triage under electromagnetic storm conditions, the instructor announced. You'll be treating simulated plasma burn victims while experiencing gravitic fluctuations and atmospheric ignition events. Medical supplies will be limited. Additional challenge: your Medi-scanners have been programmed to malfunction at random intervals. One trainee raised a hand. Sir, what's the minimum survival percentage? 70% of your patients should survive the exercise, the instructor replied casually. Though I'll be impressed if you keep it above 85 in these conditions. He glanced at monitoring equipment. Storm intensity is increasing. Perfect. Begin exercise in 3 minutes. Zig couldn't believe what they were seeing. The trainees showed no fear, only focus and a strange enthusiasm as they prepared their equipment. When the exercise began, the chamber was deliberately flooded with electromagnetic pulses that caused localized gravity to fluctuate wildly. Trainees were suddenly weightless, then crushed to the floor under triple normal gravity, then hurled sideways as gravitic shear rippled through the chamber. Simultaneously, patients, realistic dummies with actual biological components, were teleported into the chamber, displaying horrific injuries. The trainees immediately began treatment, adapting to the changing conditions with practiced ease. When pockets of atmosphere spontaneously ignited around them, they didn't panic. They used the momentary illumination to better see their work before continuing in relative darkness. The most disturbing part was their behavior. They were joking with each other, laughing. One trainee lost a finger when a gravity shift slammed a medical instrument through their hand. Their response was a creative string of expletives followed by, "Hey Jenkins, bet you a week's rations I can still complete this suture one-handed while upside down." The challenged trainee, Jenkins, grinned through a face smeared with simulated blood. "You're on, Rodriguez. But if you bleed on the patient, it doesn't count." "Standard rule," Rodriguez nodded, applying a quick seal foam to their own wound before continuing to work as if missing a digit was a minor inconvenience. Zig had seen enough for one observation session. They needed to transmit this data to the Alliance immediately. But as they turned to leave, a voice stopped them. "Technician Alvarez, didn't expect to see you in observation today." Zig turned to find a human in a command uniform studying them intently. The nameplate read Commander Eva Rostova. The face was weathered, with a long scar running from left temple to jaw. But it was the eyes that caught Zig's attention. They held the calm, evaluating gaze of a predator. Zig's cover training kicked in instantly. "Yes, Commander. Monitoring environmental control systems. We're getting some unusual readings during peak electromagnetic activity." Rostova nodded, but her eyes never left Zig's face. "Interesting. I wasn't aware we had maintenance scheduled during live exercises." She stepped closer, her movement casual, yet somehow threatening. especially since I approved the duty roster myself this morning. Zik felt a cold dread that had nothing to do with Gehenna IV's frozen hemisphere. Their cover was compromised. But how? The infiltration had been perfect. Perhaps there was a communication error, Zik suggested, already calculating escape routes. Perhaps, Rostova agreed amiably. Or perhaps you're not Technician Alvarez at all. Without warning, her hand shot out, gripping Zik's wrist with surprising strength. Your skin temperature is 2 degrees below human norm. Your pupillary response is non-standard. And most importantly, she leaned in close. The real Alvarez has a microdermabrasion scar on their left earlobe. A detail not in any personnel file. Zik could have broken free, could have shifted form and attempted escape. But the facility was locked down, the environment lethal, and something told them this human was prepared for such attempts. Commander's office. Now, Rostova ordered, her voice still conversational despite the iron grip on Zik's wrist. I believe we have much to discuss, Agent, starting with who you really are and who sent you. Rostova's office was surprisingly austere for a commander. No decorations, no personal items, only functional equipment and a wall of monitors showing various parts of the facility. She gestured for Zik to sit while maintaining a careful distance. You could drop the Alvarez appearance, she said. It must be taxing to maintain in these conditions. When Zik hesitated, Rostova sighed. Let me be clear. We've known about your infiltration since before you arrived. Your Alliance transport wasn't nearly as stealthy as you believed. The only reason you're still alive is because I was curious what you'd do and what you'd report back. Seeing no point in maintaining the deception, Zik allowed their form to shift, reverting to their natural state, a silvery, vaguely humanoid figure with fluid features. Even this caused discomfort under Gehenna IV's conditions. Better, Rostova asked, seemingly unperturbed by witnessing the transformation. Now, let's be civilized. You're Agent Zik of Galactic Alliance Special Intelligence, here because your leadership is concerned about human activities on Class Omega planets. Correct. Zik considered denying it, but the situation called for a different approach. Yes, though concerned is an understatement. Terrified would be more accurate, Rostova nodded. I've read your Alliance classification standards. These worlds are deemed uninhabitable by your criteria. So finding us not just surviving, but training military personnel here has sent your council into panic mode. Wouldn't your people react similarly if you discovered an unknown species training in environments you considered deadly? Zik countered. Rostova actually smiled at that. Fair point. We'd probably nuke the site from orbit rather than send in a lone spy. But different cultures, different approaches. She tapped a control on her desk, and one wall transformed into a view screen. Since you're here, let me give you the tour you really came for. The screen showed a series of training scenarios across different facilities, each more harrowing than the last. Humans training in vacuum conditions with minimal protection. Combat exercises in radiation zones that would kill most species instantly. Survival drills in gravitational conditions so extreme they warped space-time itself. This is beyond military preparation, Zik said quietly. This is systematic conditioning to survive apocalyptic scenarios. Precisely, Rostova nodded, though we prefer to think of it as pragmatic preparation for realistic threats. What threats? The Alliance has maintained peace across 3 galactic quadrants for millennia. Rostova's expression darkened. The Alliance sees what it wants to see, monitors what it can monitor, and catalogs what it understands. But the universe is much darker and stranger than your council comprehends. She stood and approached the window, overlooking the perpetual storm. 53 years ago, by your time standard, we lost contact with one of our deep space research vessels, the Avalon. When we found it 6 months later, the entire crew was dead. Not just dead, but transformed. Their biomass had been repurposed, reconstructed into something that was neither alive nor dead by conventional definitions. Zik felt a chill. A viral agent? Biological warfare? We thought so initially. But the pathogen, if you can call it that, wasn't biological. It operated on quantum principles we still don't fully understand. It didn't just attack the body. It rewrote reality around the infected. Rostova turned back to face Zik. That was our first encounter with what we now call the Void Convergence. Since then, we've documented 14 additional incidents across 9 systems. Each one progressively worse. Each one featuring technology or biological agents that defy conventional physics. You're suggesting an existential threat that has somehow escaped Alliance detection, Zik said skeptically. I'm telling you, there are predators in the dark spaces between stars that your species hasn't evolved to perceive, Rostova replied sharply. Things that exist partially outside normal spacetime. Things that see sentient life as we see resources, something to be consumed and converted. She tapped another control, and the screen showed images that made even Zik's fluid physiology recoil. Biological mass twisted into impossible configurations. Structures that seemed to extend into dimensions beyond the visible. Technology fused with organic matter in ways that violated natural law. We've recovered artifacts, Rostova continued, her voice clinical now. Things left behind by whatever these entities are. Studying them has cost us researchers, facilities, even a small colony. But it's allowed us to develop countermeasures. Limited ones. And these training facilities are part of those countermeasures, Rostova confirmed. We discovered that human physiology, when pushed to extremes, develops a resilience not just to physical conditions, but to certain reality distortions. By training in environments that should kill us, we're building resistance to the convergence's ability to warp physical laws around us. Zik processed this information, their analyst's mind searching for inconsistencies, for signs of deception. They found none in Rostova's demeanor or presentation. Why hasn't humanity contacted the Alliance? Shared this threat assessment? Would you have believed us? Rostova asked. Simply, an upstart species, barely out of its planetary cradle by your standards, claiming to have discovered a threat that your ancient civilization has somehow missed? We'd have been dismissed as delusional at best, or at worst, suspected of manufacturing a threat to justify our military expansion. She wasn't wrong, Zik realized. The Alliance Council would have reacted exactly as she described. Besides, Rostova added, we're not entirely convinced the Alliance itself isn't compromised. The convergence operates by infiltration before overt action. It co-opts systems from within. Your leaders might not even know if it's already established footholds in your governance structures. The implication was clear and chilling. Humanity didn't just fear the unknown. They feared that those who should be allies might unwittingly be vehicles for something worse. I need to report this to my superiors, Zik said finally. Of course you do, Rostova agreed, surprisingly amenable. In fact, I'm going to give you data to take back. Evidence we've collected, analysis of convergence patterns, and a proposal for cautious cooperation between our species. She fixed Zik with that predatory gaze again. But understand this, Agent. The only reason I'm allowing this is because we've predicted that contact between humanity and the Alliance was inevitable. Your presence here simply accelerated the timeline. We are prepared for any response, from alliance to hostility. Zik understood the unspoken message. Humans were ready for war, even against the combined might of the Alliance, should it come to that. After what they'd witnessed of human training methodologies, Zik wasn't entirely confident about who would win such a conflict. The emergency session of the Alliance Supreme Council had been in progress for 6 consecutive standard days. The chamber, designed for decorum and orderly process, had devolved into something approaching chaos as representatives argued, threatened, and occasionally stormed out only to return hours later with renewed vigor for debate. At the center of the storm stood General Zyler, Ambassador Vlar, and Fleet Admiral Kthar, along with the recently returned Agent Zik. The data they had presented, Zik's first-hand observations combined with the information provided by Commander Rostova, had shattered the Council's worldview and left them struggling to formulate a coherent response. Order. Final order before recess. Supreme Counselor Txathalian's voice boomed over the cacophony. As silence gradually fell, he continued, We have 3 formal proposals before this council. We will vote upon reconvening. Admiral Kthar, restate your position. Kthar stepped forward, her feathers still erect with agitation despite days of debate. The evidence is clear. Humans represent an imminent threat to Alliance security. Whether their claims about this void convergence are genuine or fabricated is irrelevant. They have developed military capabilities in secret that could destabilize the entire quadrant. The only prudent response is immediate containment action. You mean war? Vlar interrupted, mandibles clicking in agitation. Preemptive defense, Kthar corrected sharply. A targeted strike on their training facilities, followed by a blockade of their home system. We must act from a position of strength before they further develop their capabilities. With respect, Admiral, Zik spoke up, their fluid form rippling with emotion. Based on what I observed, such action would likely fail, and even if successful, would potentially remove our only defense against the threat Commander Rostova described. A threat we have no independent verification of. Kthar countered. Only human claims and conveniently provided evidence that could easily be manufactured. TX Athalion raised a massive hand. Ambassador Vlar, your proposal? Vlar moved to the center platform. The diplomatic corps recommends isolation and observation. We establish a quarantine zone around human space, limit all contact, and monitor their activities from safe distance. This avoids potential conflict while protecting Alliance interests until we can independently verify humanity's claims about this convergence threat. Cowardice dressed as caution, Kthar muttered, though loudly enough to be heard. And finally, Tixathalion continued, ignoring the comment, General Zyler? Zyler took the platform, her reptilian features set in determined lines. Military intelligence proposes a third option, conditional engagement. We approach humanity openly, acknowledge our awareness of their activities, and propose a limited partnership specifically focused on investigating their claims about the void convergence. She activated a holographic display showing analysis of the data Rostova had provided. Our preliminary assessment suggests that while some of this could be fabricated, key elements show pattern consistencies that will be difficult to falsify. Particularly, the quantum signatures from the recovered artifacts show properties our own scientists have theorized but never observed in nature. You're suggesting these human claims might be legitimate? The question came from a Solarian representative, their large eyes blinking rapidly in distress. I'm suggesting we cannot afford to dismiss them without investigation, Zyler clarified. If humans are preparing for war against the Alliance, close engagement will reveal that. If they are genuinely defending against an existential threat we've failed to detect, dismissing them could be catastrophic for all sentient life. The chamber erupted again into argument. TX Athalion eventually managed to restore order and announced a 12-hour recess before the final vote. As representatives filed out, Zik approached Zyler privately. General, there's something I didn't include in my official report. Something Commander Rostova told me in private after our formal meeting. Zyler led them to a secure area where they could speak freely. Continue. She said that humanity has been aware of the Alliance for over 70 years. That they've been deliberately avoiding contact, staying off our scanning grids because they needed time to prepare. Prepare for this convergence threat? Yes, but also... Zik hesitated. She implied that they've been watching us, studying our response patterns to various crises. She said, and I quote, "Your civilization looks impressive from a distance, General, but it has deep structural vulnerabilities, the kind of convergence exploits. We needed to be ready to stand alone if you couldn't stand with us." Zyler was silent for a long moment, absorbing the implications. They've been evaluating us as potential allies, finding us wanting. It would appear so, Zik confirmed. And based on what I witnessed of their preparation methods, I'm not certain they're wrong. The final vote had been closer than anyone expected. 19 for engagement, 16 for isolation, 2 for preemptive action. With a bare majority, Zyler's proposal had prevailed. Now, 3 standard weeks later, The diplomatic shuttle Reason Discourse approached the designated meeting coordinates at the edge of human-controlled space. Aboard were Ambassador Vlar, General Zeiler, and a small team of diplomatic and military personnel, chosen for their psychological stability and open-mindedness. Admiral Kthar had refused to participate, making her objections formally known before the mission departed. Approaching final coordinates, the pilot announced. Sensors detecting a vessel ahead. Configuration unknown. Not matching any Alliance database entries. On the view screen, a ship materialized against the backdrop of stars. Its design was unlike anything in Alliance records, sleek yet angular, with propulsion systems that emitted no detectable radiation despite the vessel's evident speed capabilities. It had appeared seemingly from nowhere, suggesting stealth technology beyond current Alliance capabilities. Open communications, Vlar ordered, adjusting his diplomatic sash nervously. After a moment, the view screen shifted to show the interior of the human vessel. Commander Eva Rostova stood center frame, now dressed in what appeared to be formal diplomatic attire, though even this managed to incorporate functional elements that suggested readiness for combat. Beside her stood several other humans in similar garb. Ambassador Vlar, General Zeiler, Rostova greeted them with a nod. On behalf of the United Earth government, I welcome this dialogue. On behalf of the Galactic Alliance, we appreciate your willingness to meet, Vlar replied, following diplomatic protocol precisely despite his visible nervousness. Your council voted for engagement by a narrow margin, Rostova observed casually. Admiral Kthar's absence speaks volumes. Zeiler stepped forward. You have sources within our government. It wasn't a question, but Rostova nodded anyway. As you had Agent Zik within our facility, let's not pretend this relationship begins from a place of trust. It begins from mutual necessity. Over the next 4 hours, the preliminary diplomatic meeting established ground rules for ongoing interactions. The humans were forthright about their capabilities, but vague on specifics, not revealing the full extent of their technology or military assets. The Alliance representatives similarly held back certain information while trying to project openness. The true shift came when discussion turned to the void convergence. Rostova introduced a human scientist, Dr. Eleanor Kwan, who presented detailed analysis of convergence activity patterns. We've tracked 14 major incursion events and 62 minor reality distortions across this sector, Dr. Kwan explained, displaying a three-dimensional star map with ominous markers. The pattern is accelerating. Based on our projections, we expect a significant event within the next standard year. She highlighted a region of space unervingly close to major Alliance population centers. This area shows quantum instability consistent with pre-incursion signatures. We believe it will be the next target. Why have our scientists detected nothing? Vlar asked, genuinely puzzled. Your sensor technology is optimized for different phenomena, Kwan explained without condescension. We developed specialized detection equipment after our first encounter. We can provide the specifications, allow your scientists to verify our findings independently. Zeiler studied the human carefully. You're offering to share technology? Limited technology, Rostova clarified. Detection systems only. We're not offering weapons or defense systems. Not yet. This is a trust-building exercise, General. You verify our claims about the convergence threat. If confirmed, we can discuss deeper cooperation. And if we find no evidence of this threat, Zeiler asked. Rostova's expression remained neutral, but her eyes hardened slightly. Then you return to your council, report your findings, and make whatever decisions you deem appropriate. But I suggest stationing your fastest vessels at the projected incursion point. When, not if, the convergence manifests, you'll want to document it carefully, and be prepared to evacuate nearby systems. The message was clear. Humanity was confident enough in their assessment to allow verification, but they wouldn't waste time trying to convince skeptics. They would continue their preparations regardless of the Alliance's decision. As the meeting concluded, formal protocols were established for ongoing communication and scientific exchange. The humans would provide sensor technology.